myself again, but it's the only way.
Hi, welcome to NUFC Matters with me, Steve Wraith, joined by Mick. It's a pre-recorded show, so we won't be chatting or taking questions from the chat today. But Mick, how are you, mate? You okay?
Yeah, very good, Steve. You?
Yeah, very good, mate. Very good. And
good.
of course, looking forward to seeing you on Sunday.
And you likewise.
On stage with Peter Beardsley, which should be fantastic. And looking forward to seeing as many of the NUFC Matters crowd there as well. Mick, I've done this with everybody on the show this week.
Yeah,
we can just talk about a win. Another win. They're scarce, but we've got another one in it. The trip to Leeds wasn't fruitless. Came back with all 3 points. It was an important win, mate. We couldn't afford any more slip-ups after the draw against Watford.
I'll tell you what, it's interesting, Steve. I mean, normally somewhere along the lines, you always hear someone who says, "Oh, I knew they'd win. I had a couple of quid on them. I had a tenner on them. I had a fiver on them. I had 50 pence on them." I haven't heard a soul be honest enough to say, "I just didn't see it. I just didn't see it. You didn't see it. I didn't see it. Nobody I knew see it." But sometimes in football, the strangest things become the most pleasant things in the world. And I was listening to it, and you're tearing your hair out. Leeds are all over the place. It sounds like jumpers in the playground. And then they nick a win. They nick the game. And suddenly the whole life changes, 12 to 14 to 15 to 16, you've got a 4-point spread between those four teams. If it is 3 from 4, because Everton, had already lost against Aston Villa. So they're thrown into it. Leeds United may be thrown into it courtesy of the Newcastle win. So, now it's onwards and upwards against Everton, which suddenly become a huge win and a huge game in all sorts of manners. But first and foremost, as you say, Leeds United, no one saw it. A real good, I wanted to say a good impression, but at the same time, it was hard work. It was hard work, but they've managed to grind it out. They've managed for something that we haven't seen them do for a long, long time, and that's not concede a goal, and managed to win it by 1-0. So happy days.
Any standout performances for you? I mean, for me, obviously at the game, I was really impressed. Again, Shelvey had an outstanding game. Trippier was superb. I've got to be honest, Jamal Lascelles, apart from one mistake, had his best game for a long time in a black and white shirt. And obviously, the performances of Sean Longstaff. Once Joe Linton went off, which I'll go into in a minute. Again, a lot better. But I mean, who was your standout man?
Well, I think you also look at it in different ways, in relatively different ways, because, it's one of those situations where it would be unfair to cancel one out, or unfair to just say that one player, because 11 against 11 against Leeds United, that's what you need. You need all team. And at the end of the day, Trippier is a fine player. Shelvey's somebody who I like anyway. There were one or two of those players that you mentioned who I would always think they're always likely to turn in a decent performance. Shah was the one for me. I just think because I was beginning to lose patience of Shah, Fabian Shah, and also I think I'd said on the Saturday morning, even though Jamal Lascelles was getting all sorts of criticism, Shah's been just as culpable at centre back as well. And all of a sudden, he turns in that sort of performance. And he is a talented footballer. He just sometimes isn't a particularly talented defender, and maybe on occasions just doesn't put it in enough. So I think I would have gone with Shah, because as much as anything, Steve, we know that we do have, in the case of Trippier, in the case of one or two midfield players, including the likes of Sean Longstaff when he really puts it in. Also, of course, attacking options, the Maxims of this world, etc., etc. But I think it's centre backs that have really, really, and quite rightly, had the sort of criticism that they've had. So I think you've got to say the fact that it's ended up as 1-0, it's ended up as them not conceding a goal for a long, long time. I think you talked about Lascelles, but I talked about Shah. But I think you've got to talk about the centre-backs. Not that I don't in any shape or form want to take their eye off the ball and think we don't want to get or don't need to get some cover before the end of the transfer window. But for the moment, just for the time being, Lascelles, and particularly for me, Fabian Schär, did very, very well against Leeds United.
Yeah, I mean, the thing I mentioned earlier on with Joe Linton and Longstaff is somebody made a point on social media just after the game that Longstaff, came on. He looked a lot better when he wasn't playing alongside Joe Linton. Is that a little bit of an issue, do you think? Because, I mean, Joe Linton has been taken away from being a centre-forward. We know he's not a goal scorer. He's made a great impression in that centre midfield. But sometimes when you slot somebody in like that alongside another player, it can put another player off. He's almost a bit like a spare part, isn't he? In a lot of ways, Sean Longstaff. He's treading on his toes.
And I think, in a roundabout way, you're absolutely right. Because, and I will still hold my hands up. And I mentioned it in a roundabout way last Saturday. I know he's been improved. I know he can't have been anything else but better than he was for the 2 years previously with Joe Linton. And Eddie Howe continues to tell us that actually, that the pennies dropped because he was never a centre forward, and he's a midfield player. But even though he's improved, I think he's improved as much as anything because he's put a shift in, and he's put a shift in that he'd never put previously. Regardless of whether he's scoring goals or not, he wasn't scoring goals as a centre forward. He's still not scoring goals as a midfield player. But as a midfield player, if we call him a midfield player now, what he's doing is he's putting a shift in. He's putting, he's putting an effort in, which is fair enough. And that's all you want. That's all Newcastle United have ever wanted about their players over the years. They've just wanted people to pull the shirt on and do the effort. So he's doing that. But I agree with what you've said in a roundabout way. Even though I like what Eddie Howe's done about Joe Linton, and he has been better, but then he could not have been anything else but better, I still don't think he is a bog standard proper midfield player. Sean Longstaff is a proper midfield player. Sean Longstaff, beg your pardon, knows exactly what he does, what midfield players do. He'll get a goal now and then. He'll link the play. He'll be occasionally defensive if he needs to be defensive. He's a proper midfield player, and that's what we saw when, just because it was needed, Joe Linton withheld against Leeds United. In comes Longstaff. Longstaff looks a better player. And Longstaff still, for me, looks a better player than Joe Linton. I've still got to be convinced that Joe Linton, by any shape or form, whether it be a centre forward or a midfield player, but what he's doing, and I'll accept this, is at least he's trying, at least he's working, at least he's pulling for the shirt, which is something he didn't do for 2 years. But Longstaff's a better option for me, definitely.
Yeah, Chris Wood got a bit of grief again on the timeline. And I mean, it was happening around me at the match as well. The kid's only played 2 games. He's a £25 million striker. He's not a goal scorer. Gibbo and Malcolm were quite quick to correct me again on Thursday night. It's easy. A goal scorer is a goal scorer, a striker is a striker. But £25 million spent on him to bring goals in. Now, the argument I was having with Gibbo was, look, they brought him in. He's averaging 10 to 12 goals in a Premier League season, but he plays alongside somebody. That's what he's been doing. He's been playing alongside a goal scorer, and he will pitch in and he'll do his work. We still need to bring in somebody, to finish those chances. And Gibbo was going, well, why we spent £25 million on Chris Wood? It's a waste of money. We've overpaid, and but I was trying to make him see that because the argument really started over the whole, what position. Somebody asked the question, what positions do we need to strengthen in? And I personally said, I think that if this window closes and we've only signed Trippier in that back four, I think we should push to get a central midfield player and a goal scorer more than a centre half. I think a centre half. I think with the defenders we've got at the club, and with the goalkeepers we've got at the club, we will be fine as long as we get a centre midfielder, a really good centre midfielder. Which, fingers crossed, this is pre-recorded Friday. We're in the process of trying to sign Bruno, and a goal scorer. I think we'll be fine. I think we'll stay up.
I'll tell you 3 things about Chris Wood. And I made the point the morning after he sold, and I got a lot of criticism from a lot of people who said that you were calling he's 7 out of 10. You were calling he's not the greatest. You were saying he's probably no better than Dwight Gale. You were saying this, you were saying that. But I'll still stand by it. But I'll give you 3 instances of what the problem is and the problem that Chris Wood has. And I mentioned it once, certainly one of them in that morning, and that was the expectation, the criticism, the pressure, Malcolm McDonald knows that better than anyone. To be fair, Chris Wood will never be Malcolm McDonald. Very few players will be Malcolm McDonald, either for Newcastle or as a top centre forward. He was a top centre forward. Now Chris Wood is genuinely, by my state anyway, by my feelings, he's not the greatest in the world. He is a 7 by 10. You're talking about 10 goals for Burnley. I'm sorry, by anybody's thoughts, 10 for 12 for Burnley is not outstanding. It's not outstanding. So he goes to Newcastle where there's that amount of pressure. He hasn't really got the greatest track record in the world. The other problem he has as well is that he's costing 25 million. And going back to Joe Linton, who I just talked about, 40 million. Now, the one thing I always said about Joe Linton was, as badly as I thought he was and as poor as I thought he was for those 2 years, it's not the lad's fault. It's not the lad's fault that he cost 40 million pounds. If somebody offered you 50 million pounds, Steve, to do NUFC matters, you wouldn't say no. If somebody had asked me to be a commentator and say, I'm going to pay you 100 million pound a year, you're not going to say no. So Joe Linton, 40 million pound, somebody else paid that money. Chris Wood, somebody paid 25 million. It's not Chris Wood's fault. So don't talk, for starters, don't talk about him 25 million. 25 million, 20 million, 15 million, 10 million. Call it what you will. It doesn't matter as far as the lad himself's concerned. So that's unfair. But the problem that you've got first and foremost is he is a centre forward for Newcastle United. And being a centre forward for Newcastle United is a tough gig. Trippier can go in at right back. Becker might go in at left back. Dan Burn might go in there. Guimarães might go in there at centre midfield. People will continue who are still at the squad already, will play in this position and that position. None of them will face the wrath of Newcastle fans like the guy, whoever it is, whether it be Dwight Gale, whether it be Callum Wilson, whether it be Chris Wood, whether it be Steve Wraith, whether it be Mick Lowe's, whoever it is, whoever pulls on the centre forward shirt for Newcastle United, you can forget it in terms of it not being pressurised. So it just comes with the territory. It comes with it's unfair, Steve. It is unfair. You're right. After two games, we shouldn't be screaming and bawling about this kid has not scored 2, he hasn't scored 3, he hasn't scored 1, he hasn't scored 2. But that is the nature of the animal. That is what being centre forward of Newcastle United is all about. It's being a centre forward. In an ideal world, you would have a Shearer. In an ideal world, you would have a McDonald. To a lesser extent, you would have a Demba Ba or a Papis Cisse in recent times. But at the minute, we are stuck with what we've got. Chris Wood's come in. He's a Premier League player. He's a British player. He knows the track. He's played at the wrong end of the Premier League, so he'll scrap and he'll fight. But I have absolutely no doubt, Steve, and this applies to all and the majority of a lot of Newcastle United signings, either existing as it is or going to happen over the next 2 or 3 days. Believe me, a fair percentage of them will be gone in 2 or 3 years' time, without a doubt. Because in an ideal world, what we're doing here is we're moving. We're setting things up for the big picture. The bigger picture in 3 years, in 5 years, in 10 years. Think about KK, Steve. Think about Garland, Guppy, Cormac. Think about Killer. Think about David Kelly, who was, once we got to the Premier League, David Kelly was told he was needed elsewhere. This is what happens in football clubs. Once you start moving the ball on, once you start moving the level, the playing field, then you're surplus to requirements. And I have no doubt whatsoever that Chris Wood will be surplus to requirements within 2 years or so. There's probably one or two others. I mean, I saw an interview with Trippier saying that, okay, I've got a 2.5-year deal. In 2.5 years, hopefully, we might be in Europe. We don't know. But he knows realistic enough, Kieran Trippier, that maybe he's not going to be here in 5 or 6 years' time. I think there's a distinct possibility because he's that sort of fella. But that's what we have at the minute. We have a transfer window where we're trying to work people into the squad who we know in the majority of them, and they know as well that they're not going to be there for the long term. Guimarães is the exception. Guimarães is a 24-year-old Brazilian. He is the real deal. He is the real deal. So if we get him and he's right and ready, then he is proper. Trippier to a lesser extent, but there'll be one or two others, and Chris Wood will be one of them, who will be all about staying in the Premier League and then moving on.
Yeah, I mean, look, as I say, we're time sensitive. We've had to pre-record this. It's Friday morning. Guimarães, Bruno, of course.
It looks
fairly definite. Medical's booked in, and I mean that's a signing that's going to excite fans and takes you back a little bit to the days of the entertainers.
It does to a degree, Steve. But I have to say, I did immediately think, going back to. I hate to keep talking about Joel Linton, but you know, you're talking about somebody who could be conservatively 10 million pound cheaper than Joel Linton. I mean, if you're talking 33 million or thereabouts for Guimarães, you know that is a cheaper deal than Joel Linton. But as I say, let's forget about the whys and wherefores of deals. Who did them? Who didn't do them? The fact that it isn't the player's fault. But he does look the real. I have to say, I've spent 2 or 3 days reading up with people I know who know Brazilian football. Tim Vickery, of course, from the BBC. They absolutely rave about this fella. Absolutely rave about this fella. So, you know, I think we can be genuinely excited about it. The other side of the coin, though, is that, you know, with the transfer window still to be there until midnight on Monday, they need more. They need more, and they particularly still need centre backs. Let's not take our eye off centre backs. Let's think about, you know, let's, instead of worrying about the Brazilian, let's worry about the midfield player who could potentially be an absolute superstar for the next 5 or 6 years. Guimarães. What we need first and foremost is to stay in the Premier League. As I've said, I've just talked about the fact that it's now concertinated into Norwich, Newcastle, Watford, and Burnley. It looks very healthy, that back four, providing, you know, we are the fourth of the four who succeeded. But don't take our eye off the ball. They have to. There's games to win between now and the end of the season, and first and foremost is to get more defensive cover to this squad. It's desperate that they get more defensive cover. We do, but we don't need. You know, imperatively, we don't need centre backs. We don't need centre midfield players. We need centre backs.
Yeah, Trippier has done a little bit of media this week, and you know, that guy just oozes class. I mean, England international, England captain, and you know, overall 10 out of 10 so far for Kieran Trippier, and you know, we got a bargain there, I think.
Well, I have to say, because I heard Big Al say it on Match of the Day last Saturday, but I think it was maybe 2 weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, when we were sat with Stu and Mitch and Al Waid, and I think I said very early on, maybe the day after he arrived, think he could be a captain. And I remember thinking at the time, he looks to me like the sort of guy. We don't have the characters that we have at the minute. We don't need the leaders. We haven't got the leaders that we've got at the moment. And I just thought even then, and that was very early on, within literally a day or so, he could be a potential captain. And I think he still looks he still looks to me like almost certain to be captain of the side next season. So yeah, he is, and again, as you mentioned it there, all right, okay, you know, money wise was convenient. He is 30 years of age, but 12 million is an absolute snip, He really is, and it's not. And as I say, this is you know, my argument about, you know, people being proper people rather than perfect players. He's a proper player. And even if he wasn't an extremely very good footballer, he's a very good human being, and he's good in that dressing room. He's good in that squad. So he even dependent on what happens at midnight on Monday night, he could be the pick of the transfer deadline without a doubt. You know, I know Guimaraes, everyone's raving about him, but this lad Trippier could be the jewel in the crown in terms of the transfer window.
Got to say, in this transfer window, it's been great, hasn't it, Mick? Just to be competing after 14 years of literally, you know, sitting, expecting nothing, watching tumbleweed go by on transfer deadline, jokingly saying each year goes by about poor Keith Downey. Well, Keith will have an early finish, or point is him standing, being there up there in January, freezing cold because nothing's happening there. But this time, every programme you can turn on transfer window on Sky, 9 o'clock in the morning, first 10 minutes dedicated to Newcastle. It's just, and even if we don't get off of these players, we've been linked with hundreds of players. Who cares? We're back in the mix.
Tell you a funny story. This was probably in the very early days of social media. It probably was pre-Twitter. It may well have been Facebook. Whichever
MySpace.
Whichever social media it was. Anyway, it's deadline day. It's deadline day, Steve, and it's about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Me, Wendy Taylor, and David Craig are stood at the bar of 9 Bar having a glass of wine. Because, you know, we think, right, okay, it's done and dusted. Wendy has quite rightly given the rest of the media a little nod. It's not happening. Nothing's happening. Yes, they're pretending about this. Yes, they're pretending about that. But just to give you a wink, it's not happening. Next thing you know, Wendy looks at her phone because she was media guru, and she had social media back in the days. I don't think I even had social media. And he suddenly turns around and he points a picture of me, David Craig, and Wendy stood at 9 Bar with a glass of wine and a little caption saying, "It's obviously nothing's happening again on transfer deadline day." So we worked out that these two lads stood opposite at a table have obviously got a picture and taken this picture. So I wandered across. I said, "Hey lads," I said, "do us a favour. Don't start doing that." "What do you mean? What do you mean?" I said, "The picture we've never done the picture. We've never done the picture." So I said, there you go. All right. Okay, lads. Well, but that's what it was. That's what transfer deadline day was. And this is, say for argument's sake, it was a Friday. You're pretty well known by about Monday or Tuesday that there was nothing going to happen that week. And it was criminal. It was criminal. You were saying, and you were being told little porky pies, and poor old Wendy was having to sort of bend the rules here and bend the rules there. Oh, there's a chance we might be getting him at Bilbao. Oh, we might be getting him at Leverkusen. Oh, hang on. The talk at Ajax is nothing. Not a whisper. Not a whisper. So it is. You're right. Absolutely. It's fantastic. And I'll tell you another thing as well, Steve. I'm a little bit surprised that I see a lot of people saying, "Oh, we shouldn't do this, or we shouldn't do that." Spend the money. I hear people saying, "Oh, Diego Carlos, 40 million's too much." I don't care. Pay 50, pay 60, pay 70. I mean, obviously we have to be within reason in terms of the rules, and they must be aware of the rules as well. But do it. I mean, we must have bagged the bank to the tune of about 3 billion for the last 14 years. So let's spend a little bit. I mean, as it turns out now, we're probably getting there. We're probably getting there towards 50, 60, 70 million, whatever. Fair play. fair play, and it is, as you say, it's nice, and I don't care. But you can't win either way. You can't win either way. You get from people who'll take great joy in saying, "Oh, Newcastle now, oh, money bags, here they come." You know, you can't win either way.
4 weeks ago, we were listening to the media, essentially saying, these people haven't got a director of football in place. They haven't got a chief executive officer in place. They're going to struggle. They're naive. They don't know what they're doing. You and I both said on here, these people are business people. These people have done deals. These people did the biggest deal, the hardest deal, and that was to prize Newcastle United away from Mike Ashley. Have you been impressed with the way that they've conducted themselves in the deals? Because let's face it, Manchester United this week have pulled off what can only be described as an attempted robbery by saying to Newcastle United that a player that wants to leave, Jesse Lingard, has to has to wait, and he's at the bequest of his paymasters, of course. He wants to come to Newcastle. It's quite clear. He wants to leave on loan or on a permanent deal. But they've essentially said, okay, Newcastle will deal with you, but we want £12 million on top of you paying his wages and on top of a loan deal. And it's called a relegation clause. And that relegation clause that they have stipulated is that if Newcastle survive and stay up, then they get paid 12 million because they've given them Jesse Lingard to keep them up. Now I've never heard that. Now, fair play to Newcastle. They told them, well, just stick it. Now, that deal might still go through. Who knows? Before transfer deadline goes through, it might still go through. But what's your thoughts on that? And what's your thoughts on the way that they've handled the transfer window? Well,
in terms of Manchester United, that is football for you. And once upon a time, on one occasion you're the devil yourself, and the next minute you're the guy who's being, apparently you're the one who's struggling at the receiving end of somebody else. I mean, if you think about Andy Cole, do you think we genuinely wanted Andy Cole? Of course we didn't want Andy Cole. Of course we didn't want Andy Cole to leave for Manchester United. Andy Cole probably didn't want to leave Newcastle United to go to Manchester United, but somewhere down the line they managed to operate them. They managed to do this, they managed to do that. They threw in Keith Gillespie into the deal as well. But either way, they absolutely broke the hearts. They broke the hearts of Newcastle United. I mean, remember the steps. KK has to actually come out and be honest enough to face up and tell these Newcastle fans who can't believe that their boy Coley is on his way to Manchester. So, they broke Newcastle hearts, I was going to say many occasions, but probably that was the worst of the lot. So, but that's what happens. That's what happens. The big get bigger and the beasts get worse, and this now Newcastle are in a position. Going back to the point that you made about the new owners, the one thing I would say is I am a little bit, and I have been somewhat critical. I have been a little bit critical of the fact that I would have wished that by now they'd have got some sort of director of football, some sort of chief scout, some sort of scenario in place where they had people who were working. But first and foremost, we can never be critical of them. We can never be critical of them because of what they did and what they achieved. And the fact that they gave our football club back. They genuinely did that. They restored and rescued Newcastle United from the state that it was in with Mike Ashley. And for 14 years, the talk we've just mentioned about transfer windows that didn't exist, everything else that was being run down, there was no communication, etc. They have rescued this football, and because as a result, we said at the time it probably happened quite quickly for them, so they probably hadn't put all their ducks in a line, so they probably didn't have things ready to go for a January. I don't think they were probably expecting a transfer window. I suspect they probably thought the ownership was going to kick on either post 2022 and look towards a transfer window of summer this season, where obviously you've got more time, you've got more options, etc., etc. So they've been caught a little bit unaware. And yes, they probably should have been a little bit more savvy. But you cannot be anything other than grateful to the fact that they're still trying. They're still there trying. Yes, I would have liked somebody better than Chris Wood. Yes, I have to say, if Dan Burn goes through, I don't think Dan Burn's the greatest. But don't forget, I've just rattled through some of those names that KK and Newcastle, Darren McDonough, we threw all sorts of names in 1991, 92, just because you were desperate to try and get bodies through, to try and stay in that division, to try and then get into the top flight. So, that storyline was even more desperate than this one. But no, you cannot be anything but impressive of what they've done. In a perfect world, we would have had A, B, C, and D. We would have all them in their right officers, in the right procedure. We would have deals working here, deals working there. But the top problem as well is, in terms of transfers, as I mentioned, is that it's such a fragmented transfer window in terms of there are players who don't want to go because they're too big. You get players who don't want to go there because they know that they're only going to be there short term. If you ask for too much money, again, you then question yourselves whether you should really demand that much money for the likes of Diego Carlos or whatever. It's a very, very difficult one. But no, yeah, we at the end of the day, when Midnight Monday comes around, whatever happens, you have to be happy about what you've done with the new ownership at Newcastle United. And I still maintain now that they will be enough to stay in the division.
Dan Burn's an interesting one as well. You've just touched on him. And Newcastle born, of course, was at Newcastle up until the age of 11. Obviously had to, seek his professional career elsewhere. 29-year-old, 6'7". His stats look really good. Is he an improvement on what we've got already?
I would have to say no. I genuinely do. And this is almost like the conversation we had about Chris Wood. I really don't think. I mean, as much as Lascelles, maybe not so much Fernandez, Shah. Yes, they've not exactly been fantastic, and they've been far from it. Dan Burr is, Wigan Athletic, Fulham. I sent you a text a couple of days ago from a mate who ticked me a wink that he may well be on his way, and he's a Fulham fan, and he knows Fulham inside out, and he really couldn't get a game for Fulham. Now he's done pretty well at Brighton, but they've changed the way that they've worked at Brighton. They're obviously like him at Brighton. They work in a slightly different way, but again, it's one thing being Brighton and Hove Albion or Burnley and being Newcastle United. And I just honestly think that if we genuinely thought we wanted about Diego Carlos, if we wanted X, Y, and Z in terms of high-profile centre-backs, then Dan Burn, a bit like Chris Wood, suddenly feels like he's an option that we've a bit desperately decided on him rather than anybody else. The one thing I will say about centre-backs, Steve, and people will know this because it's very, very clear as the face on up. It's that centre-backs are tough. Once upon a time, centre-forwards are your top boys, and they are your top boys. And they're the more expensive, and they're most expensive of all. But centre-backs are almost harder to get hold of. If you think about how much problem Manchester City and Guardiola had for years about Man City, here and there and everywhere, Stones, you name it, Laporta, they've just about got it right. Chelsea couldn't do it for life or money after having, John Terry for years. They couldn't get us. They've just about managed through Tuchel to get themselves good centre-backs. And as a result now, they don't concede, although they've now dropped. But Arsenal couldn't get centre and still can't get centre-halves. They cannot get centre-halves to save lives, Arsenal. And then you think about the one exception. Who's the one exception? Who's the standout? Probably one of the standout footballers, never mind centre-backs, in the Premier League. And that's Virgil van Dijk. And Virgil van Dijk is a godsend to Liverpool. And he's essentially been the difference between a team who've got closer and closer to getting back to the sacred gear of winning a Premier League. They finally won one, and they won it because of Virgil van Dijk. That's how important these centre-backs are. So again, even though we're talking about Dan Burn, even we're talking about who we would like and who we wouldn't like, they are incredibly, incredibly difficult to find. And because as a result of that, and you've got an ownership from Saudi Arabia, there's no doubt about it, and not just severe, but clubs left, right and centre will be looking at Newcastle and they'll be up in the ante 20, 30, 40 million every time, because centre-backs are absolutely premium when it comes to squads.
Okay, time for the ad break. Thanks to all our sponsors. Spider VPN for all your internet security. Google Spider VPN. They come up at the top of the Google search list. They are the boys to trust and will protect your computer from unwanted bugs. Skipsandbins.com. Telephone 0800 25 45 25 3. Email inquiries at skipsandbins.com. Website www.skipsandbins.com. Easy contract, free and pay-as-you-go waste collection. Thanks also to L&G Family Funeral Directors, 0191 389 7245, and to Garden of Healing Dispensary, CBD hemp and cannabinoid specialists, www.thegohd.com. Thanks also to Arcot Interiors for all your kitchen necessities. You can find them at the bottom of Heaton Road, and Google Arcot Interiors. They come up at the top of the Google search list. Thanks also to qtechshop.co.uk, the makers of pool tables and snooker tables in Wales and Newcastle, and the guys who run our website, NUFCmatters.com. Thanks also to jabsignature.co.uk for all of the flyers that they do for us. Thanks to Media Arts for all the video work. If you're a first-time visitor to the channel, please subscribe. Hit the Newcastle Legends logo in the bottom right-hand corner, and that's it. You can subscribe for free. We still do 7 shows a week, and they are all free. Hit the thumb up underneath the video to like it. Click share to your social media, and drop into the comments box to speak to like-minded Newcastle fans. We're also available as a podcast on iTunes and Spotify and other podcast providers. The show usually goes up 24 hours after the show. If you want to join the NUFC Matters cult and get a cup, a pen, a scarf, and your membership card and entry into the monthly draw, put your phone over this QR code and it will take you straight to the website. Failing that, go to NUFCmatters.com and become a member. If you want to come and see Malcolm MacDonald pre-match or post-match, we are at the Dog and Parrot. It's kid-friendly and it goes great food and beer, and you can come and meet Malcolm in person before the match or after the match during the season. Make a donation to the food bank via nufcfansfoodbank.co.uk. The matchday bucket is operational 365 days of the year. If you want to follow us on social media, then go to NUFC Matters. We've got a Facebook group and we've got a Facebook page. And if you're into the true crime stuff that we do, then follow Steve Wraith's True Crime Interviews, and that is a Facebook group. My personal Twitter following page is @Steve Wraith, and Instagram is Steve Wraith. Give me a follow on there too. Just want to talk about Joe White, Mick, and that is interesting. They've tied him down. Obviously, see something in the kid. He's 19 years of age. It looks as if he probably will get a chance to go out on loan to Hartlepool. Is that going to be a good move for him, getting a bit of experience at the lower level?
Has to be, and also first and foremost, it's even more important that other than Joe White, that there are another half a dozen somewhere along the line who we properly push through the academy at Newcastle United, because it's been virtually non-existent for a little while now. Every now and then you get the odd one or two who you get murmurings that yes, this player's coming through, that player's coming through, and it's interesting, because I was thinking at one point there is an argument that says that the problem for youngsters coming through is that with multi-millionaires of players X, Y, and Z, they just don't get the opportunity because, basically there are foreign players coming in from overseas for big money, and our youngsters just don't see the same, amount of play time that they should do. Now, actually, there's an argument the other way as well that says, regardless of whether you've got top players, there's also an argument that says when you're at the wrong end, in the way that we've been in the wrong end for too many seasons now, again, you're reluctant to pitch them in at a game where, for instance, at Elland Road, for instance, where you've got a huge one, or Everton, you've got a huge one in 2 weeks' time in terms of relegation, or Brentford or Norwich, or these sorts of games where you really need teams to really graft. And it's unfair then on it to stick a youngster in there because, and I suppose the long staffs to a degree are part and parcel of that. You're trying to think of examples. I mean, obviously they are slightly older than Joe White, but I think they've suffered as a result of this because it's desperate. It's tough for young players. You don't have time on the game. You don't have the opposition from managers or players in and around you in the 11 saying, just take your time, son, just take your time. Don't worry about it. You've done well. Do this, do that. It's too helter-skelter. It really is 100%. It's like, oh my God, again, that's another defeat. And who are we going to pick on? Oh, we'll pick on the youngster who just couldn't hack it because he's a young man trying to find his way. In an ideal world, I mean, you look at what Guardiola does with Foden. You've got Foden, one of the great talents of British football, and for a phase anyway, he barely played at all because he didn't need to. You could pick him, cherry pick him here, cherry pick him there, give him 20 minutes, give him half an hour, maybe in a League Cup tie, FA Cup tie, gave him a 90. Just keep telling him he's okay. Keep telling him he's okay. If you're a kid at Newcastle United and you're trying to desperately to work yourself as a professional career, you're working in a madhouse. You've got no chance of playing in an environment where it's nice and relaxed. Just play the ball, do this, do that. So it's almost as you said there, it's almost better to take them away out of an environment where there's not that pressure. There's not 52,000. I mean, all right, they're not 52,000. They're not necessarily first team players, but they're in and around the Northeast. They're in and around Tyne and Wear. They may be playing at the reserves. They may be playing at the academy. So yeah, I think it's a great opportunity to get him away. We should have done it with other players, but first and foremost, we should get more players. And again, this comes back to the argument about on top of everything else that these people are desperately trying to sort the mess that Mike Ashley had. One of those involves the training ground, the academy, all the sorts of things, all the facilities, all the amenities, all the things that these young men need to forge a career and get Newcastle United at levels 16s, 18s, 20s, and then into the first team. Just get it done properly. But it's a big job. It's a big job.
Yeah, it is a huge job. The trip to Saudi Arabia, of course, we spoke about this last week, but, it was talked about by some people as, it's not in good taste going to Saudi Arabia, etc. Some people think going and having warm weather training when it's freezing cold over here and you've got to come back and play against Everton on probably minus 2 or minus 3 next week, judging by the storm that's on its way, isn't a good idea. But from a team bonding point of view, it looks like it's gone really well. And again, because the club communicate now under this regime, we're getting some great video footage, especially on the club's Twitter account, on there. And it looks as if it's been really good. And it was great to see Fernandez in particular being picked out by the cameras. He looks fresh. He looks fit. Obviously there's a couple of players away on international duty who aren't benefiting from the trip, but great. I think it's been great. I think it's been really positive. And again, I know we'll probably end up going across to Saudi again on a bigger tour and play in front of supporters. But I think it's been all in all a very good team bonding exercise, Mick.
And I think I made the point a week ago. I honestly didn't see it as a problem. I didn't see it was going to be a trouble. I think I actually joked about the fact that there probably won't be that much excitement about Saudi Arabia as a city of Newcastle United turning up from an airstrip somewhere, getting off a plane, getting into a training facility. Yes, they might have played one game against a team locally, but in the main, it's a different world. It's a completely different world. So it's in that sense, it was ideal. They, as I said, get them locked away in the middle of nowhere, halfway around the world, and just get them sorted. And as you say, there's been no hullabaloo against it. That they've done what they've needed to do. I mean, to be honest, you barely knew it had happened. You barely knew it had existed. There's nobody screaming and shouting about this, that, and the other. There was no problems in terms of PR. They've just gone about their business. They've been respectful to the Saudi people. The Saudi people, likewise, have liked what they've seen. One or two of the players have got involved and been involved with local kids in local schools, etc., etc. It's been fine. It's been perfect. It's been exactly what it should be. Well, as I said last week, it's the least we should do for a group of people, for an ownership who have rescued this football club. We should, quite rightly, go to there once every 6 months, once every 3 months, once every 8 months. It's what you should do. Be gratitude, be grateful. So yeah, it's been fine. It's been fine. Look after the COVID, look after the testing. But as you say, the weather's been better. Let's see whether it makes a huge difference. I doubt, to be honest with you, it's going to make a huge difference. I doubt we're going to be world beaters against Everton, but I don't think it's done any harm at all. And it certainly has been no bother, no trouble whatsoever. I think it's been fantastic. I think it's been the right thing. It's been good.
We've got a couple of days to go in the transfer window. Is there going to be a surprise, Mick? Do you think Newcastle United and the fact that we've got Saudi owners and the fact that we've got good players in so far, do you think there could be a surprise? Because there's been talk, especially by Mitch and the guys who live out in the Middle East, about a marquee signing. Do you think we might see a little bit of action before the close of the window?
It's very, very interesting, Steve. And this is the one thing I've thought an awful lot about. And I think what I'll find more than anything is, I think I will learn more from something like that, should it happen, about the relationship between Eddie Howe and the new owners. I think we will know more about that, because the one thing I think I've sensed in the transfer window to date is that, and I find this very reassuring, because again, I've been prepared to say he's been struggling, and one win from your first 10, it's now 2 from 11. It's better. It's still not great, but it's not, as I mentioned a week ago, it's not been as impressive as Dean Smith and Steven Gerrard. But what I will say is, slowly but surely, the thing that impresses me is he looks his own man, Eddie Howe. And I think if Eddie Howe's his own man, and I think if Eddie Howe has pushed Chris Wood, and I wouldn't be surprised if he's pushed Chris Wood. He clearly pushed Kieran Trippier. He may well know Dan Burn a little bit more if Dan Burn goes at the football club. Obviously, Guimaraes is probably just one of those where you just think you have to go there. You have to get there. He's 24. He's Brazilian. Everybody you talk to. I mean, in many ways, providing he's there, you just sometimes, in many ways, think, why? I mean, I know Arsenal was talked about, but you do think to yourself, why is Guimaraes not at a bigger club at this minute in time, respectfully, than Newcastle United? But going back to your argument about, do we see one between now and midnight Monday? I would probably go against it because I think that's what Eddie Howe wouldn't want. I don't think you want to rattle the cage. I don't think what he wants, first and foremost, and I watched him again at his press conference a week ago, he spent an awful lot of time talking about, regardless of transfer windows, regardless of the new bodies that are going to come through the squad, the bodies who are going to come into the building, I need to make sure they look and they work as an individual, as a squad, as a group. And if you throw in a marquee signing, if you throw in a Bale or a whoever, then you're running the danger of spoiling the group, or certainly bringing somebody into the situation who, especially financially, if suddenly you've got somebody in the dressing room who's on £300,000 a week, I'm sorry, that causes all sorts of ruction. So as much as in many ways you would quite like it, I would be more interested to see if Eddie Howe is digging his boots in and saying, no, I just want proper people. I want proper people who are coming here to save Newcastle United and make sure that Newcastle United are staying in the Premier League at the end of May. Not necessarily about the fact that we'll sell however many thousand shirts, or how many we're going to see people extra at St. James's. I mean, you're going to see them anyway. So I'll be interested. What I do think, though, Steve, what I do think is that what's more likely is that at loans, at least one loan, if maybe not two loans, will come in. Because going back to the argument I've talked about for the last 3 or 4 weeks' time, they just make sense to me. They really do make sense to me. If you can get somebody in for loan, who you say to them, okay, if you want to stay around, stay around. If you don't want to stay around, but we're gonna provide you with the opportunity to be with Newcastle United for the remainder of the season, and then let's see what happens. So I think the loans are likely to kick in, but whether the big marquee signing comes in, I wouldn't like it, and I don't think it's likely to happen.
Okay, Everton at home, of course. Tuesday, February the 8th is our next game. So still a bit of time before we have to pull on the black and white shirts again and go up and sing our hearts out for the lads.
Yeah.
But yeah, transfer window, of course, will finish. How important is it now to be focusing on that game and looking at it? I mean, great news yesterday from our perspective that Decore and Fabian Delph are now both injured and are going to be out for 4 weeks, Mick.
Yeah. And then Everton are moaning and groaning about that. I mean, you can't win either way. One team will moan, the other team will say, "Oh, okay, it's worked well for us." What we know most of all is that all of a sudden, after that Aston Villa defeat by Everton, suddenly, if we beat Everton, suddenly this perilous 3 from 4 that we've talked about for a long time now can genuinely exist as 3 in 5. And 3 in 5 just gives you the opportunity of 2 to play with. If all of a sudden we go to 18, Everton have got 19, regardless of what Norwich, Watford and Burnley do. And as I mentioned last week, the problem is that it's slightly fragmented in terms of who's had this games and who's got that many games. As is always the famous saying in football, you'd want the points before you want the games. So if we beat Everton, if we go to 18 and Everton have got 19, regardless of what Norwich, Watford and Burnley are doing, either way, it's seriously again back to 3 from 5. And 3 from 5 is an awful lot more comfortable than 3 from 4 and having to depend on just being the last man standing. Suddenly, there are 2 men standing from the 5 available. Leeds, would they get dragged back into it? I probably think not. I think once they get injuries, they still looked impressive enough. Even a week ago when they beat against Newcastle, I think they'll be okay. So, Everton are very much at this minute in time, because we don't know what they're going to do in terms of their ownership. We don't know what they're going to do in terms of their management. They look a bit flaky in terms of a squad as well. So, Everton could get dragged into it. Again, it's unlikely. It still remains more than likely that it will be 3 from 4. But then again, if we have a really good transfer window, then all of a sudden it might be a different ball game altogether. It really might be.
Tickets available on the door for an afternoon with Peter Beardsley on Sunday. Come and see me and Mick, and Super Mac and Gibbo, of course, will be doing the warm-up. Should be a great day. It's a Sunday afternoon. Doors open for standard ticket holders, at VIP ticket holders at 1 o'clock. And if you just want to come along and watch the show, get yourself along for 2 o'clock. Tickets available on the door, and get yourself down. It should be a fantastic afternoon. The show starts about 3, be finished at 5. Give us your favourite memory of Peter Beardsley, Mick.
Oh dear, too many. I've already spent this week, oh God, remember that? Oh, remember that? I've had some good times with Beardo over the. We did the 1998 World Cup together, and that's one of my favourites. And this will tell you an awful lot. People will hear it on Sunday, but if they've never heard it before, because obviously he's a Geordie boy, he's home, and very much home is where the heart is. But we spent just over a month together in France, up and down the country, and we did not only all the England games, we also did the Scotland games as well. So the England games, fair enough, but the Scotland games, we used to turn up at football grounds, whether it be Lens or Saint Etienne or wherever it was in France. Scotland were playing Colombia. They played Norway. I can't remember who their third group game was. But either way, we'd get out the car, we'd park the car park, and then we'd have about half a mile to the ground, through the press areas, etc., etc. And you'd walk up, and there'd be me, Steve Bauer, who was working with me, a producer who was working with me. And then all of a sudden, Pedro had disappeared. And you'd look round, and all you'd see would be this little Geordie, and in and around him would be about 300 mad jocks, 300 mad Scottish football fans, and all they want, pictures, autographs, shirts, the lot. Pedro. And honestly, and that is a measure of the man. Not just the fact that he was English, not the fact that he was a Geordie, but the fact that he's a legend. And if you think about Scottish football, and you think about your Jimmy Johnsons, you think about your Dalgleiches, they've got a bit of style about them, haven't they? Scottish football, you think about the Archie Gemmill goal against Holland, remembering that. Well, Pedro, you could hear them saying, "Oh, I wish you'd be one of us. I wish you'd be one of us, wee Peter," And they on it. So in the end, we had to leave him. I say, "Pedro, look, here's your ticket. There's the exit. Just come and get us, will you?" And sure enough, we'd be in there. We'd set all the gear up. It'd be about 5 minutes to kick off. And he'd finally arrived, God bless him. He'd taken about 3,000 Scottish autographs, 3,000 Scottish selfies, the lot. That is what Peter Beardsley's about. That's what a proper football fan. It's not about Geordies. It's not about England. This was about the Scots, and they wanted to pay their rewards and pay their respects to him. Brilliant.
Looking forward to it. If you haven't got your tickets now, get yourselves along. You can pay on the doors. I say you heard the times earlier. Mick, as always, the clock has beaten us, but great to see you. Look forward to seeing you on Sunday, and we'll see you back on NUFC Matters next week. Take care, mate.
See you then, mate. See you. Bye.
Critics attack. It feels like I've been talking to myself again. But it's